For the audience who doesn't know what it is to be a libertarian, what is a libertarian to you?
Somebody who believes that we each have the right to make our own choices and that society works much better if we can each interact voluntarily rather than having the government be in charge of us.
Okay, so you would say, so make our own choices. So far, that doesn't seem very controversial. Everybody would say, I want to be able to make my own choices for myself. Now, are you saying that both the Democrats and the Republicans want to make choices for you?
Oh, absolutely. Just look at the recent COVID and schools when it just broke my heart how mothers were going before school boards begging, please teach my child in person. Please don't make them wear a mask. They're getting behind socially. They're getting behind educationally. And there was no choice because it was a monopolistic system.
So let's just say during COVID, we had Joe Jorgensen as our president. How different would things have been?
Oh, like night and day.
Let's hear it. I'm curious.
No mask requirements, of course. No business shutdowns. And what a lot of people don't realize, they say, well, it was so good, though, that we shut down the economy so that people didn't get sick. But you have to look at politicians being politicians. Of course, they allowed the big box stores to be open. They let the big guys be open. It's the small mom and pop stores that they shut down. So, people think, well, we need politicians, we need government to help the little guy. But it's actually government that's hurting the little guy. And what's very distressing, hearing the message from the left, I would love to explain to everybody on the left who says, big corporations are bad. We need to cut them down to size. Well, big corporations are big because of government. It's because government is giving them special privileges and powers and money.
Can you go even a little bit deeper than that? So let's stay there. Okay, COVID. It is COVID 2020. So would an Anthony Fauci be there under your presidency? Would we have a Surgeon General that would come out, or somebody from the CDC or somebody from the NIH that would come out and say, well, here's what's going on with COVID. Here's what we got to look at with this. We got to get the vaccine. It's going to take us 9 to 18 months. How different would you have been that urgent? Would you have shut down travel restrictions coming in from China? Would you have restricted people coming in from Europe for the period that we had? What were some of the decisions you would have made?
No, I would not have restricted people, and there would be no Anthony Fauci giving edicts. It's one thing to have a medical unit as an advisory committee. It's another, though, to allow them to be making decisions. For instance, the CDC was basically making decisions on rent, on whether or not you could evict tenants. That's such an overreach of what it was intended.
Okay, but go a little deeper for me. If there wouldn't be an Anthony Fauci, who's giving us updates, and what are we learning? So
you're a medical doctor. You're a medical doctor.
So how about if I can't afford medical because I don't have a medical doctor? Who's telling me what to do with COVID?
Oh, we could spend 2 hours just on medicine. So if I could divert there, a lot of people say, capitalism isn't working, so we need to have a one size fits all. We need to have socialized medicine. Well, we don't have capitalism in medicine. What we've got is we do have so many rules and regulations that we're not getting the competition needed. And the biggest example would be insurance. A lot of people say, well, insurance is too high. Well, that's because it's not insurance. What if your car insurance paid for oil changes, getting your car washed, and putting gas in your car? You wouldn't go around looking for the cheapest gas station because what do you care? Insurance company's going to pay for it anyway. And then the next year, your premiums are going to go up because the insurance companies are going to have to raise prices because you weren't looking for the cheapest option. Right now, there's absolutely no incentive to look for the cheapest option. In fact, I gave birth to both my daughters in a birthing center. And it was basically a 3-bedroom house that had a kitchen. You even had to bring your own food. Excuse me. And this was in the 1980s. And I think it was like $900. And and you get the doctor. And I remember telling a friend of mine, like, wow, the birthing center, and only $900. And she said, oh, but I want to go to the new women's center. And there had just been this big story about how they had redone it, and they had $600 bedspreads, and I don't remember how many thousands of dollars it cost, but no skin off of their nose. So, and now I realize that's an extreme. That's a higher, that's at the higher end. But even just going into the doctor for a checkup, or going in because you have an ear infection, that would be a lot cheaper than taking your car in. If we can take our car in for a $300 repair, then why can't we go to the doctor and get a $90 checkup?
But Dr. Joe, let's go back to it. So it's COVID. Mm-hmm. So there's no one that's going to give me updates on what's going on with COVID. We're not shutting down. Fine, I like that. We're not closing travel coming in from China. So,
well, do you mind if I interrupt?
Please.
Sure. And you said nobody is giving updates. The free market would definitely be giving updates. I mean, we've got companies now who are giving us updates about other things out there. So why wouldn't there be some, let's say, McDonald's of healthcare, who was saying, putting advertisements on TV, saying, okay, this is what the latest research is showing. You need to come to our clinic for whatever, mm-hmm. to get tested, whatever. So, no, we get a lot of information in the free market. In fact, look at all the information we get off the internet.
If I may?
Yeah. Please. Yes.
So you're president. We know it's a pandemic, and it's coming fast and heavy. What would your administration response be to a populace that is scared to death of this word pandemic, and they're hearing it coming? What would we have heard from your administration in terms of a national response? Because this isn't just bad flu season. This is a pandemic.
Well, okay, but let's back up. Part of the reason there was so much fear was because the government put the fear in people. If you look at college-age kids, high school kids, the death rate for this was actually lower than the flu. For younger people, even lower than that. You don't get up to the death rate of the flu until you get much older. So again, would we be doing this for the flu? Would we be shutting everything down? Would we be calling it a pandemic like that?
That's what I was getting back to, is asking you to just kind of elaborate for us on Pat's question about, so you would have been, as our president, coming to the microphone saying, hang on a second, we're using the word pandemic, but you would have then said
well,
things
but who put the word pandemic out there to begin with? It was the president. It was the government. So I'd be coming out there saying, as you've seen in the news, we've got this new disease going around. We've got this new virus. And I would act as a leader, not as a king. I would act as a leader, telling people, go to your medical professional, go to your doctor, now, of course, under a libertarian administration, if we had fixed healthcare to the point to where it wasn't a monopolistic system, because that gets back to, we talk about high cost. Doctors are a government-run monopoly. The government grants indirectly grants how many people can get MDs and how many people can practice. I mean, if they did that for plumbers and car mechanics, that would be sky high too. So if we had different people out there providing services, an increase in nurse practitioners and so on, it would be much cheaper, and we could easily say, go to your health care provider.
So I think I relate to some of the elements of libertarian. I do. I fully relate to it. I get it. But for me, it feels like to do what you want to do, if you were president in 2020, it would be a mess. And here's why.
And it's not a mess, and it wasn't a mess now?
It was totally a mess, but let me explain to you why I think it would be even a bigger mess. Because I think to do what you want to do, or even inject that spirit, don't you think it makes more sense to start from Congress Senate, governor, and work your way up to have other people that are infrastructure, that are, like if I would ask you right now, how many of our congressmen are libertarians? Registered libertarians, how many would there be?
Oh, none.
How many senators do we have that are registered? Then you're not gonna, you don't have pull. So okay, let's just say you're president, you wouldn't get nothing done. In today's system though, but in today's system, let's just say if you were to become president in today's system, who's gonna back you up from the left or the right? They have a monopoly today.
Except if I were president, then there would also be incoming senators and congresspeople, because it's not going to be one person getting elected out of everybody. It's going to be a movement. There are going to be other people. You really think that somebody's going to elect a third-party president and only the president's going to be libertarian?
No, I think, no, I don't think that. I think, I think the movement is going to need help from different places. I do believe that, but you also need backing. Now, don't get me wrong. The best third-party candidate of all time is who? Abraham Lincoln. He's the first Republican, right? He was third-party, came out, boom. You can tell the Teddy Roosevelt story, right, on what he did. You can go look at Ross Perot. People will throw George Wallace in there, Ron Paul in there. There's a lot of names that they'll throw in the best third-party candidates, right? But wouldn't it make sense to go and get others internally converted rather than going straight to the top? Because if you can pull up some of the numbers. So some will say the following. Some will say President Biden is president today because of you. Meaning you.
And they would be wrong, but go ahead.
But I would show you the numbers. Some would say that you're the reason why President Biden is president.
No.
Pull up the numbers I just texted you. I don't know if you have that or not, if you can put it on the screen.
Well, like for instance, I did beat the spread in several states. For instance, Pennsylvania, I did beat the spread. But what you would have to say is something like 85% of the people who voted for me all would have gone to Trump. And that's not the way it would have gone. We tend to get votes from both sides. So it may be if every single vote I got went to one person, but that's not the way it works.
Well, more libertarians would probably align themselves with a Trump than they would with a Biden.
That's not what the research shows. We draw equally from Democrats
50-50?
and Republicans.
You think so?
That's what the research shows. Absolutely.
So
Can you unpack that for a second?
Keep
describe
in mind.
the Democrat that comes across.
Tom, let her finish. I want to actually hear what she's going to say.
Well, actually, what I was doing was I was basically going to be answering your question. Look at cannabis reform. That's libertarian, and that's on the left. Look at marriage equality, where gays are allowed to get married. That's libertarian, and that's on the left. Abortion, although I tend to not, that's an issue that I stay away from. And Ron Paul made a libertarian argument for being pro-life. So, that's a very inflammatory. So, but that would be where Democrats and the Libertarian Party would agree on. Immigration. I mean, you go right down the line. There are many people who come over from the left, and I've talked with many of them. In fact, I met somebody at Bitcoin yesterday. Very, very interesting story. He was on the left, and then he went to a diversity class, and the professor at a college. And he was the only male in the class, and or maybe a white male. But the professor said, if you are a white male, there's 100% chance that you're going to rape somebody. And he was just appalled. So he immediately became a conservative. But then he didn't like some of those ideas, and then he found out about the Libertarian Party. He said, okay, that's me. So.
Go ahead, Tom.
No, that's what I was going to ask, is to describe the typical Dem that would come across and the typical Republican would come across. Who were those voters? Because we've learned about that identity politics that we see through the media doesn't really define anybody. But then we discover with a lot of demographic acuity, like what happened to Terry McAuliffe when the mothers of children in Virginia were so incensed on the level of control over the education of their kids. And we can see that it was all races, but the common stripe was women with children under 8th grade really flipped out and turned on him. And so that's what I was looking for, is groups like that you can describe. It's like young people that are at public schools, but that came from public education with this and this. I didn't know if there was like typical, kind of an archetype for these voters. You talked about issues, but I was kind of curious about the people groups and typicalities, such as moms of kids under 8th grade of all races and economic backgrounds attacked Terry McAuliffe, and he was not governor of Virginia.
Right, and I was so glad to see him leave. Now, unfortunately, you mentioned kids in public schools, and if we extend that to college, unfortunately, most of them are going to the left, and we gotta put a stop to that problem. In fact, I am part of the founding of an organization of libertarian educators trying to get together to see, okay, how can we stop this? How can we get in there? And because, something like 96% of professors lean to the left, and we've got to get in there and show them and opposing a more sane alternative.
If you enjoyed this short clip, click over here to watch another short clip. And if you want to watch the entire episode, the entire podcast, click here.